There we go.
So go ahead, Richard, you can get it going. You all know we don't have a recording secretary, so there are no minutes to share. So the agenda went out without an approval for prior meeting, but now with the Zoom, it really is possible to revisit the entire meeting in its fullness, its complexity, which I did do. I don't know how many of you others did. It was very useful for me, as it was back in April, that last meeting. I think at some point we might review if somebody would like to get filled in. How many of you actually of the committee I get to review the last meeting? Just out of hands, show of hands. Thumbs up, no? Ian, yes? Priscilla? Don, yes?
No, sorry.
No. Lisa, did you get
No,
to
I
see the
didn't.
minutes?
No.
Okay. Well, it was very enlightening from perspective, at least. And it's germane now, particularly because of Gordon's most recent letter, which I suppose ought to get mentioned in communications. But before we get to that, are there any additions to this agenda that anybody from the committee would like to suggest? Okay, no additions. So the significant communication was Gordon's letter. Did everybody get to read it on the committee? Anybody not read it?
Which letter are you referring to, Todd?
Gordon sent, Jonathan actually sent a letter with, sent an email to all of us, as well as to the select attachment. That was a letter from Gordon about deciding not to move forward with a referendum for the wastewater, just because, for a variety of reasons, really.
Yeah, I actually talked to him today. I was getting material ready for the Chronicle, so I did hear about all that.
Okay. Well, I suppose it, we don't really to read it, but we'll put it into the minutes, I suppose. Not that there are any minutes, but
I would characterize it as a postponement, more cancellation.
Yeah, right. Well said. So,
Todd,
a delay.
Todd, excuse me.
Yes.
I think that the note that we got from Gordon just says, after reviewing yesterday's emails from the town clerk, but he didn't attach the email from the town clerk to that Vera sent. And I think for the sake of the people who are, the public that's decided to attend this meeting and will review it online, it's just a one-pager, and you might take the time to read why we're not going to have a vote this fall.
You're talking about reading Gordon's letter that Jonathan attached.
No, I'm talking about the letter that came from Vera Deneen to selectmen.
Right, but that's a whole nother discussion. I'm not sure that's necessarily part of this wastewater thing. That's back and forth. There was a whole, host of issues that had to be addressed when it came to referendums.
Well, the only thing that was going to be voted on, after that was our septic meeting. The November, as I understand it, can still go on with the town meeting, but she says no absentee ballots can be mailed for a referendum. So this email refers only to the West Cornwall Septic, not to the other things. And therefore, I think it would be appropriate to read it into that.
Let's put this off until we do have a section of the agenda that says timeline, and Gordon appears to be here, at least a corner of him is here. So we'll deal with that when we get to that. And I hear what you're saying. I'm not ignoring what you're saying. I understand but we're just at the comment portion. So let's just move on to, there's a public comment portion of this agenda, there seems to be two public comments, one before the meeting and one after the meeting. This is Gordon and Jonathan created this agenda, so comment portion before the meeting is a little new to me, but here it is. And is there anybody from the public who wants to comment at the moment?
Well, actually, Tom,
right.
I don't feel that those of us on the committee should be cut out. They're part of the public too, as well as members of the committee. And I would just,
Well, you'll be able to speak during the meeting. This is just a portion for the public comment.
but of course, the public can't comment on the letter or things because they haven't heard it. So it cuts them out of meaningful input.
Well, the only letter I would read would be the letter that Jonathan sent of Gordon's. I'm not going to get into the rest of that discussion because that's not germane to this meeting at the moment. So if you want me to read the letter that Gordon sent to Jonathan, I can do that. I thought everybody had read it, but hang on a sec. See if I can find it.
I have it right in front of me if you want me to read it.
Yeah, sure, please.
It
Thank you.
says, after reviewing yesterday's emails from the town clerk, I think it would be best to delay the West Cornwall wastewater project vote until spring. Doing the vote is a tight time frame. With cold on the rise and worse weather on the way, I do not think a winter vote makes sense. In the meantime, there is still work to be done in meeting legal requirements of a referendum, which can be discussed at 5 p.m. today. Thank you, Gordon Ridgway. It was sent with carbon copies to Vera, to Steve Milne, to Barbara Herbst, and to Joe Pryor as a member of the Board of Finance.
And to self and to you, to all the committee, right?
Well, it was addressed to the Cornwall Board of Selectmen and the West Cornwall Sewer Septic Committee Study Group.
Okay. Okay, so that's now been read. Now to the public comment. Does anybody from the public, have something they want us to hear at the moment? There will be a public comment at the end of the meeting as well, just so you all know. Okay, so let's move into the agenda.
It's Judy Herkimer. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, I have a comment. I have a question.
okay. Go ahead.
I'm here. In the response from USDA, from the reviewer of the application, in number 1G, he was referring to section 2C, condition of existing facilities. And the reviewer is asking for more supporting documentation. And the response from, I assume the engineering firm of Steve's, that's WMC, their response said that supporting information has been added along with the Torrington Area Health District files. Now, I would like to know what the Torrington Area Health District files are.
Where's Gordon? Gordon, you here?
I'm here.
All right, so is this a back and forth situation, or are we just going to listen to her comment and then at the end of the meeting?
I think it's
Can
fine
comment
to
on
have a
what's-
question, but and I think Steve can answer that when we proceed with our agenda, because first on the agenda is USDA communication. So he can describe that process, how it's happened, and you know, what did we learn in that part? I think.
So then, if you're not going to answer the question now, I would like to make a comment that if those Torrington Area Health District files are the same files that we reviewed earlier, just before the application was to be submitted, and we found that many of those files were completely erroneous. They were characterizing the homes and their wells and septics in the village. And we went door to door, we made phone calls, and many of the homeowners said that what was characterized in the Torrington Area Health District files were woefully, they were radically incorrect. And then a vote was taken at one of your meetings to not send those files along with the application, just for that reason, that there was a lot of information that was not correct in those files. So I just want to know if those were the files that were now sent back, were submitted to USDA after a vote was taken to not submit them to USDA. Thank you.
Okay, okay, thank you, Judy. As Gordon mentioned, the first item on the agenda is this discussion about communications with DA. So let's let Steve take it from here for the moment, and perhaps you can address that specific question of Judy's along with a host of other aspects of what's going on with the USDA and us. What do you think? You can unmute. Wait a sec. Wait. You got to unmute, Steve. Steve, you can unmute yourself. I don't see your.
Oh, how about now?
There you go. Yeah. Anybody can unmute themselves.
I see,
ahead.
I got it.
I could mute you all, but I would rather not have to do that. Okay, go ahead.
To that specific question, I'd have to go back in documents. My engineer, John, sent those off. I'm assuming they may be the original documents because that's what they were specifically requesting. And I can't on the validity of those results of what they had. They're Torrington Area Health District public records. So we may have sent it. I'll have to get back to you on that answer, Judy, as to what was actually sent as backup information. They were specifically looking for other information that we might have or was available to do with the proposal to install sewers and a treatment system for West Cornwall. And I don't remember the other question she had.
I think that was the only question that she was looking for an answer to.
Yeah. So basically where we stand was we responded to a number of comments as you have read through. We responded to all those comments. We have not heard back from USDA, the regional engineer, Steve Schrabes, as to whether those comments and are okay or not. However, we have been working closely with Norman St. Jean, who's the grants person, move ahead with trying to secure as much grant money as possible for the potential future use by the town of Cornwall. So, so you read the correspondence between Norman saying that basically the town is certainly eligible for grants and loans up to 45%. I kind of cheeked asking for 75%. That didn't go well because the town of Cornwall's current income levels are higher than that grant would be allowed by that grant. So he's basically saying 45%. It could be somewhat less, but in my history with them is if they say you're eligible for 45%, you 45% if you decide to move ahead with a project. He will not give you a firm grant commitment until there's a positive town vote on a project. Because they have no money right now set aside for the project, but they get funded. Get funded and they set aside money for these types of projects. They don't have any other projects of this type that I know of in the works. So the likelihood of getting funding is very, but they can't promise it until they know the town is serious about moving ahead. So that kind of in a nutshell is where we stand. USDA funding.
Could I just have you revisit? You said that you haven't heard back from Steve Schrabes about those comments.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so that's something we still have to address if and when they appear, and
Yeah.
we'd like to see what his, because they to me those were some of the most detailed those addressed in some of the greatest detail the plan that you had submitted. I mean, he drilled down very deep into a lot of those issues, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
So I'd like to keep us abreast of what.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Anything I send to him, anything he sends to us, you will have.
Yeah. And the
Or-
thing I was interesting was that the 75% potential is kind of reserved for settings where there's been a order put in place, right? Where there's
Well,
some kind
an order in place can enhance the chances of getting a grant in the first place, not necessarily manage. It could perhaps do that, but really it comes down to income levels. It's really what the town can theoretically afford and what the people that are paying the system can afford according to USDA standards.
Right.
That's really what it's based on.
Okay, does anybody else have questions about that exchange between Steve and the USDA?
Yes, I do.
And where? Yeah, go ahead, Joanne.
I was sort of surprised to see that there was no correspondence between April and September. I was under the obvious false impression that this was being held up by non-response from USD, but it looks like we didn't request any information or response from them until September. So the note from...
Wait, is that in fact the way it played out, Steve? Is that what happened?
I would say pretty much so. We've had, verbal communications with them to go over some issues and items. I think we met with them at one point. I don't recall, Gordon, did we meet with them one time between that time period? I don't know. But the COVID thing kind of threw a monkey wrench into things. I had certain employees that weren't because of it. We're not coming into the office and we're unavailable to move ahead with it, but we're all back working now. And we'll...
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so you agree that basically that nothing was done from the Cornwall things or your end of things for the time period in which we didn't meet, which I think is unfortunate, but it is what it is. But I noticed that October 23rd correspondence addressed to Gordon from Norman St. Jean says, "Hi, Gordon. The maximum grant I can give you is $2,214,000, which is 45% of the total project cost. I'll do my best to get you 45%, but I can't guarantee. Depends on what we have for grant funding." He says to Gordon, "How will the town be paying for this? A general obligation bond of $2,700,000, payment of $86,403 per year. I'm assuming all the taxpayers of the town will be responsible? Question mark. I'm not sure we've determined that, but maybe somebody can tell me if we have."
Well, what he means by that, Joanne, is the fact that when a town goes into a project and accepts grants and loans from the USDA, the full faith and credit of the town has to be behind the project.
I understand.
That's what he's referring to. Not that the town is paying that much money, through taxes. He's just saying the town is going to be backing the project.
Well, and I'm saying we haven't determined the cost of this project will fall entirely on the shoulders of the 45 EDUs that are in West Cornwall. It will be a generalized tax burden. And I'm presuming that's part of the reason that Joe Pryor is on this call and the Board of Finance and other involved. His letter goes on, "How will the town be paying for this? A general obligation bond of $2,706,000 would have a payment of $86,403 per year. I'm assuming all the taxpayers of the town will be responsible. Question, as well as the other debt that the town has of $354,000, which I don't know, maybe that's the balance of the school bond. That leaves O&M costs, which Steve, if I understand correctly, are a yearly cost of
Correct.
$110,000, along with a connection fee of $3,500 per user. And then the so-called 45 residential EDUs would have to pay over $180 a month to cover everything. Please advise. Now, I don't see your answer, Gordon, to his letter of September 23rd. So I'd be curious as to what your answer was to this issue. And do you expect the people in West Cornwall to pay $80 a month forever? And how would we pay that $110,000 plus the $86,000 per year for the bonding? So what was your answer to him?
I have not answered his letter because, let me back up a minute though. It's not like nothing was going on between April and September. Steve's team, as he was able to assemble it, was working on the application and submitting documents to the USDA well before we got the September responses. So Barbara was working on getting financial information and other stuff. He knew about the bonding situation of the town. So work was being done for that whole period after we suspended the committee's work, because there was agreement that the selectmen were trying to get a vote together for by the end of this year if we could. And what we were waiting for was to get the grant amount from USDA, which we got in September.
Okay, but Gordon,
So as far as, let me finish. As far as his actual numbers, I haven't had detailed conversations with him on that, but clearly, as we've said before, we expect people that sign up for this program to participate in the funding of this project. So including hookup fees, which I believe we estimated would be about $2,500, and somewhere an average fee of $100 per month for people that use the system. So this isn't all on the backs of the taxpayers in Cornwall. This would town meeting vote, so it would be a binding vote by the town's people and town's voters if they want to go ahead with the project. And instead, the full faith and credit of the town has to be applied whenever we go out to bond, and it's very careful, particular activity that the project is in its next phase. So those numbers that he put out as far as bonding amounts and $86,000 a year or whatever else are still dependent on the finance and the cost. And I think the important thing to maybe learn tonight is that the committee's work is large done at this point. The study has been completed, and now it is up to the town's people, the town's officials, and the people in charge of getting this to the next step, because obviously it can't go any farther until we have, as USDA said repeatedly, a town positive vote. And so what I have done is in the last several weeks, talking to the town's bond council, who is in charge of the next step as far as wording a referendum and making sure all the documents are in place, that the town could even proceed to a vote, because I think ultimately the Board of Selectmen, it's up to our, it's our job to get a project that has been talked about and planned and discussed for a long time in front of others in a proper way. Obviously, we can't just sign off on a document and do it. We're borrowing money, and that's a complicated business. So we're talking to the town bond council. Those numbers I wouldn't get particularly hung up on, because I did put a call in St. Jean today, but I can certainly follow up with some of those issues with him. But I think right from the start, he said that because we know there's not a lot of people to carry this project, that the town would have to initially act as a backstop to this project, both in the construction and in the operation and maintenance costs. The financial pictures overall really haven't changed since April as far as the town's financial condition. And the only thing that's really changed is that we know now that we're eligible for in the neighborhood of a 40% grant to cover the construction cost. And again, we have to talk to our experts that do this for a living as far as financing, what's the best length of bond, what's the best arrangement for the town to proceed, and also importantly, what's the language of the referendum vote, which also made some progress on. So I hope that answers some of your questions, because I think those are more details, and as far as exact amounts that are charged to people, it's been my feeling that we charge an average amount for the area. It shouldn't be zero, and it shouldn't be $200 a month, something that would be prohibitive from people signing up. It'd be somewhere in between there. What do people in the area normally pay? And again, going forward, if there's a town positive vote, there has to be a disagreement, a back and forth. Some of these questions can only be decided with more work by engineers, attorneys, and surveyors, and the officials from the state and federal government that will be reviewing this in more detail once the town body expresses an interest that they want to carry this thing forward. So again, a lot of different work has to be, a lot of boxes have to be checked. I'm going tonight at 7 o'clock to planning and zoning for what's called an 824 referral, which means basically the planning and zoning before the town votes has to say, yes, this is consistent with the town plan. That's one thing that was suggested by the bond council, and it's consistent with the 2010 plan and the 2020 plan. So I don't see that being an issue, but there are things that have to be signed off, and the financial people have to talk to the Board of Finance as far as what's the likely financial arrangement going to be. That has to be checked off. The wording has to be done by our legal advisors. And then the Board of Selectmen has to try to set a time schedule to accomplish all this that we'll do in our next agenda item. But again, I think it's all this are steps in a long list, but having the USDA sign off is good. I mean, I think they found us eligible. And again, we're going with our eyes open, trying to get this in front of the voters but I think it's important, as in my letter, to do this right as opposed to do it quickly. We would all like to have a decision, as that's the next obvious step, but there's a bunch of steps that legally we have to do before we get to that answer.
How can you get it in front of the voters when we don't have the numbers and also the costs specified?
Vern, you aren't part of the committee, so you have to wait till the public comment portion to hear your comments. Okay. Is there anybody else on the committee who wants to talk to this subject? Go ahead.
What Gordon just said was good, because I wasn't sure who to direct this question to. But when you have the O&M costs, as the letter says, 110, and then connection fees and all that, I think you're being very optimistic on the number of people that will sign up. Not to get into anything on that, but if say you only had 20 people sign up, does that double that $180 for them? But Gordon, is that going to be spread amongst the town? And is that a premature question? But I think you're very optimistic on that for EDUs. Just a thought. I don't know.
Oh, I would not disagree with you, Don, to start, that 45 is a big number. But we can't also forget that we're years away from the first flush. and this is the biggest the towns, in my mind, is going to take on for the next, 3 or 4 years. And we have been preparing for this for a long time. So the town has probably the reserves to absorb that. I did have a conversation with John Jules. I remember came in from Weston and Sampson. He called up to say hello the other day. And we talked a little bit about O&M because they're interested in running the plant. Not that they necessarily have an inside track on it, but he's been monitoring. He's probably watching this now. And part of the thing too, I think we learned, and there is going to be some testing, regardless if we have 2 customers or 45, there's going to be testing. There's going to have to be somebody watching it, but we also, I think, have learned some of the costs of the O&M are going to be in the amount of use is going to also affect how much those costs are going to be part of. As we learn in Salisbury School, a good part of their budget is pumping the sludge out, electrical costs by running pumps and things. So in my mind, if there's not a huge sign up to start, then that will somewhat reduce the operating costs, and also probably the machinery not run quite as hard as if there are a lot of people to sign up. And hopefully over a period of time, you'll get more people. So again, I think the town could have, absorbed that over, a period of time.
Todd?
Those things in backstop.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we looked at. And Steve again felt that the project, I asked him again when we looked at numbers, did you feel, this project can be done for 4.9 million? He said yes, but we won't know that number until, what happens, you look at the timeline that say that the voters approve this, in 2021 or whenever, it takes another year of design and review. That gets you to 22, then you have to go out to bid. And until we go out to bid and find a willing contractor, we won't know what the final cost of the project will be on the big nut. And that is, going forward, that's the way it works. We can put whatever we want on a 5-year plan or an estimate, but until we actually find somebody to build it, that number is going to be a question. And again, we put down 4.9 million. It turns out to be 6 million. Then we have to go back to the voters or whatever. That's our best estimate at this time for somebody that's worked with these projects. If it comes in at 4 million, then we're heroes. So again, it's not people for their best guess.
Todd?
Yeah, who's that?
It's Lisa.
Hey, Lisa. Yeah.
I ran some numbers today just because I'm curious. I've been a great promoter of having the town absorb, as much of this cost as it could. And just to put some perspective on this, at this point in time, that if that 110,000 was into the current fiscal 21 budget that we're in now, it would amount to 1.6% of that budget. And that would barely move the mill rate. Also, second point, say we start with the 30 users, the lower number in that estimate. Each of those costing $3,500. That would cost the town $105,000. And the town is, for better for worse, sitting on a lot of good, strong reserves. And again, I'll say it again, I just don't like to see a play thing in place down there because it's just not fair to the people who live in that village. That's all I'll say. It's a moving target, but.
Well, I think we've all known from the very beginning that would be an impossible hill climb. And the the only way this thing would ever fly would be as if the cost got spread throughout the whole town. And the USDA seems to permit that. And if it's something the town is willing to undertake, then so be it. But I think nobody's ever thought that West Cornwall could fund and support its own treatment plant.
But I think the clearer we make this, or the selectmen or the next group of town officials who will deal with this, is that the town is willing, involved financially, is an important statement to be making.
Yeah, well,
really, it is,
That's the nature of the first referendum, would be that very question.
Well, then I think
Gordon, do you have any wording at all on that bond referendum, or?
Oh, yeah, I have. It's long, but I have. And again, this is maybe. Let's see.
Before you even get into that?
I think, well, it's, I can read it. I mean, it's more,
Wow, yeah.
it's more intelligent.
Why don't you mail it?
It sounds more thorough. It sounds more
around.
Please, is what it is.
Send it around, yeah.
It's very thorough, but I don't think it's bad for people to understand that we're trying to do our homework, and this is the kind of detail when you compare this letter to my letter. This is not something that I could have come up with. Anyway, this is the thing, and again, we can talk about the timing when this has been, but it will be, hopefully happening soon. But it looks like now this will be next spring. But this is the kind of thing, and I don't think this is probably going to do much between now and the spring. But this is what, again, Attorney Fozzie, who is a bond counsel, and I think he was involved with the 1989 school bond, so he's been doing this a long time, very knowledgeable, and again, is giving us advice on a couple of key issues on how to. Let's see. This is. Let's see. Now, there's a couple of things the other towns that the town officials have to do. But basically, he says resolution providing for a special meeting and referendum vote at adjourned town meeting. Pursuant to provision section 7.7 of the Connecticut General Statutes as amended, a special town meeting can act upon the resolution entitled Resolution Appropriating $4.985 million for the West Cornwall Sewer, authorizing the issue of 4.985 bonds of the town to said appropriation pending the issuance thereof of making temporary for such purpose. The resolution shall be called and held, and the vote on such resolution shall be removed from the call of such meeting adjourned to be submitted to the 11 citizens qualified to vote in such meeting to a referendum at an adjourned town meeting to be held on December 4th, 2020 at between the hours of 6 and 8 at the Consolidated School, 5 Pima Road, West Cornwall. For the approval or disapproval of this resolution, the first selectman is hereby authorized to direct a call of special town meeting in accordance with the provisions of this resolution to be held at the Cornwall Consolidated School on November 1st, 2020, 7:30 p.m. to consider the resolution as of this date approved by the Board of Selectmen, to receive communication concerning resolution, to submit action by a special town meeting on the resolution to a vote of town electors, qualified and qualified voters at a referendum at an adjourned town meeting. Said meeting shall state the question to be voted upon and the ballot label with respect thereto as follows. So here's the nut of the letter, and here's what the question would read. Shall the resolution entitled Resolution Appropriating $4.985 million for the West Cornwall Sewer and authorizing the issue of $4.9 million bonds of the town to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance therefore of making such temporary borrows for such purposes as adopted by the boards of finance and selectmen be approved? Yes or no? Ballot labels will be the same thing. So that's basically, as the warning shall also state that the full text of aforesaid resolution in question are on file and open to public inspection in the office of the town clerk, that the aforesaid resolutions are taken under the authority of section 7.7 and chapters 90, 152 of the Connecticut General Statute as amended. Absentee ballots will be made available in accordance with law. The first selectman is authorized, if necessary, to change the date and details of the town meeting and vote.
But that never references the specific project, just the dollar amount?
No, it says the resolution appropriating $0.9 million for the West Cornwall Sewer Initiative.
Okay.
And I think there may be, and there's a bunch of different supporting documents that I'm not sure I have everything, but everything is tied to $4.98 million for the West Cornwall Sewer Initiative. And somewhere we talk about it being close to the covered bridge and locate it where it is.
And there's an elaborate description of what this initiative entails.
Right. And it talks about, laying lines, engineering, legal costs, and you may know, and financing costs and all that. So there is a more detailed description of the whole project that I don't have with me right now. I don't think. Maybe I do.
So before we move, move to the timeline, does anybody else?
I just found another
I have
3
something-
pages of
I have some questions, Todd.
Okay,
Gordon was finished.
just so you
Finished,
know.
I'd like-
go ahead.
Just so I can finish this little thing off.
Yeah.
There is another 4 pages of solutions that cover the bonding. So there are 9 sections of that. So it does very carefully tie it into the project as described by WMC. It also estimates that it is expected that the grant of approximately $2 million will be received. The panel's project costs, net grant will be paid by the proposed bond issue. So anyway, he's been busy cranking out the necessary supporting documents so the town could do this in the November and December votes. And as of my letter earlier today, that's been kicked down to next spring.
Right. Okay. What's your input?
Well, I mean, I really wonder what kind of advice we're getting when Vera's note, number 1 says, no absentee ballots can be mailed by my office for a referendum. So how come somebody didn't realize that a long time ago? But let's just move on.
You want me to answer that question?
No, I want to speak now. Thank you.
Okay.
I notice in the another more correspondence from that went from Stephen Schwabas, I get him to Norman St. Jean on the wastewater collection and treatment. The review of the PER stands for what, Todd? PER.
Steve, I don't know what that
Preliminary
means.
engineering report.
Okay, so he says, I reviewed the PER for Cornwall, see attached. I had a ton of comments, most of which should be able to be corrected fairly easily and quickly. That's good news. My guess is that WMC had another engineering report that they cut and pasted to create our PE. I don't consider, I would be embarrassed if I was a consultant and the recipient, the person had responded in that way, but that was there. But the numbers you gave, Gordon, were almost half of the estimates given by Norman St. Jean Rural Development and the USDA. Almost half. I mean, I'd rather go with the guys who've been doing this for years, estimates. I think that it deserves a lot more attention and more validity than as we're making when we haven't done anything in bonding since the school. So I would tend to look at his numbers with a great deal more respect. When Lisa said, and thank you, Lisa, for doing that homework on the O&M cost of 110,000 would only raise 0.6%. But then we have the cost of the bond itself, and we have the payment on that, and this includes buying or maybe Gordon's envisioning eminent domain to take the property from somebody and not pay a high price for it. But if we're going to find some place to put this, I think we should be thinking about how much it's going to cost to buy that and build it. That cost is included in these estimates. And I mean, we were told, Steve, from the very first time we talked about USDA money, said 45%, because you've done this 100 times, maybe 1,000 times. So this is no news. This is exactly what we expected, or what we were told to expect by Steve from the beginning. So it's to me, it's not any new news. But I mean.
So are you just going to berate people, or you got something you want to really move forward
Thank you for your constructive evaluation, my input. Thank you, Todd. No, I'm not finished. The 45 residential EDUs, as it said in the material that was reviewed, there were extra units built in as a contingency. So none of us are expecting 45 at that point. But then again, that raises all of the per.
Joanne, you have to get focused here. You've got to give us something, answer or respond to. You can't just carry on in this fashion. I mean, this is a meeting. We've all got to, go home eventually.
At the characterization, my input as rattling on. But
so give us
right or wrong. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have?
I could just say that I don't disagree with Steve's figure, O&M being $110,000 a year. I think it's $180 per month per person, was assuming that the users would absorb all the cost. And as I've said repeatedly, it's my feeling that the town would participate in the O&M, not do the bit, but probably do half, which is why you get me estimating half the cost of the town and half to the ratepayers. But until we get this done, we don't know that final mathematics. But even if we had to absorb if we go ahead with Lisa's plan and have the town absorb all the O&M, as Lisa said, and she's crunched numbers for a long time, the town could absorb this if that's what the town wants. I think that's been the position of the Board of Finance, is this is a doable project if you look at the general financial situation, held-on situation of the town. So, and I think a lot of those questions, as far as the length of the bond, rate of the bond, the method of financing, will be resolved in good time and be worked on by the Board of Finance. But again, the study group has done the study of the village, and the financial part is going to be largely left to the Board of Finance with consultation of the selectmen, and especially the financial advisors that we use and advisors.
Okay, anybody else have questions for Steve regarding this development with USDA? Steve, you have something else you want to?
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. In terms of Mr. Straba's comments or submittal, I can assure you, the committee and the Board of Selectmen, that there is zero cut and pasting going on in that report. It's unique out of Cornwall and to the village of West Cornwall. We simply followed the USDA format as to how they wanted the report. They have changed the format over the years, and now we've got it in compliance with their format. There was nothing. Everything in there is unique to your project. There's nothing that's cut and paste. Number one, it was an inappropriate comment by Mr. Strabas, and I will have a chat with him about and his boss. The other important point is that the USDA, this is a very unique project in terms of the funding. They have prior experience with the general public paying for a portion or a good portion of the project. Typically, these projects are paid for by the user of the system. And therefore, Norman crunched those numbers, and that's all those were. He crunched those numbers, assuming that the 45 EDUs were going to pay for the entire cost. And we've been going on for a year or more with the concept that no, the town as a whole, I believe, is going to be paying for a portion, if not a good portion. And Norman was not aware of that at that time. And that's what those numbers mean. They're really not a meaningful number. It's simply a mathematical calculation based on their experience.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I
Next,
Todd, if you notice in the engineering element responses, it does say 45 EDUs were assumed for future growth and mixed-use development. Currently, there are approximately 12 mixed-use businesses, 2 businesses, 1 library, 1 post office, and a few vacant buildings. So that's what it says in response.
That's correct. You know, it's not anticipated. The EDU count is primarily used for determining the cost per unit in terms, mostly upfront costs, as Gordon says, the connection fee. That's what that's used for. And you put in a higher number of EDUs than you actually might have today, because as people might develop or might, you know, develop a lot differently or whatever, they will probably be assessed some dollar amount for the connection cost. And that money should go back to the town to assist in paying off the long-term debt. So by assuming like only 12 people are going to be contributing, that's not how that typically works. That typically, once the sewers go in, more people improve their properties, they pay additional funds, and there's more EDUs available to pay for the project.
I'll say this too, that since we last met, people are looking at West Cornwall at the for sale signs. The old Utah store, I believe, was just sold. I don't know what the potential use of that is, but I have talked to people that have looked at a potential food store, people that have looked at other buildings for a physical therapy office. So people are looking, but none of that all those proposals held up by lack of sewage. So people are still looking. It's a question. I mean, I just think that's another important. We're not, I don't know. We're at the starting point. We're hopefully not at the finish point, and that's historically the role of some of these projects, is to make more possible, which based on interest seems to be people are interested. So just thought I'd throw that out. We're not in a vacuum here. We're not interested in doing things in West Cornwall.
okay, let's move along. The timeline to a referendum. Now, this, I'm not sure you were here, Gordon. We talked a little bit about the letter that you sent to all of us about delaying any referendum, at least the spring. So any of those dates that you had in the bond obviously are going to have to change, right? The town meeting.
Yeah, I talked to Joe Fazzi this morning, said it looks prudent to postpone this to the spring. Now, again, some of the things the select wrestling with, you know, over the summer is how do you do votes? How do you have a town meeting process in the age of COVID, where there are restrictions from the way we used to do it? And ultimately, that's, you know, I share Vera's concern that we want to do this safely, and I think she was relieved that to hear we're talking about the spring. But there are also still, the statutes that govern how a town makes a decision in meetings are largely still in place despite the new reality of COVID. So again, the bond council had us consult the Torrent Area Health District as far as how do you have meetings. My thought is you have some people that probably aren't going to want to come out to public, even if we hold them. So there would be a need to have some sort of virtual information meeting ahead of time, followed by to do a referendum. What the referendum is part of the town meeting process. So you have a town meeting, the selectmen, after they get legal advice, would set a town meeting that's adjourned to a referendum that has to happen within 2 weeks after your town meeting. So the town meeting, there'd be no vote. It'd basically be an informational meeting following some sort of virtual meeting to get people that don't want to come out. 2 weeks after that, you'd have to have your referendum, and those are set by statute. But now another advantage of waiting, we can try these things, and there may be ways, according to bond counsel this morning, that we can give people more time for absentee ballots.
Gordon,
So again,
the town meeting has to be an in-person event?
yes, that is, we have learned that. At this point, there's been no statutory authority that we have been able to come across that us out of having a in-person town meeting. There was emergency orders issued by the governor last spring for us to adopt the town budget by votes of the Board of Selectmen and the Boards of Finance. But that is not cover town meetings and other actions. So since that time, other towns have had town meetings in person, because those are all required by the statutes. So again, this would be, you'd have a meeting, you'd have an informational meeting, and then you'd have, a virtual information meeting, then you'd have a town meeting, which would be set ahead of time to adjourn 2 weeks later, which would be a machine vote for people that want to vote in person. And you'd also have absentee ballots available for people, referendum. And again, because the rules that we, again, have learned are slightly different for a town meeting referendum than they are for the national elect. Apparently there's more flexibility on ballot distribution. And that's why Vera said she couldn't mail these things, which you get through the mail if you want to do it for your vote coming up on November 3rd for your national election. Apparently the rules are somewhat more restrictive. Absentee ballots, the criterion are more restrictive, and the procedures are more restrictive than they are for the national election. And again, the Secretary of State is mailed out, or however, the absentee ballots are available to people who say they are going to vote absentee ballot because of COVID in the national election. That's ruling, same decision by the state to allow absentee ballots without the narrow reasons of illness or that you have to have for to vote in a town meeting by absentee. You can do it more broadly for this national election. But so, and again, we're still working on that to see how it works the best for the people running the election, because we felt all along, even before COVID, that there was going to be substantial interest from people that aren't here all the time. So, and again, the voting pool is bigger than it is on November 3rd because people that own a certain amount of property can vote. So that's probably going to pull in 400 eligible voters. So again, another reason why we have work to do, but a lot of that work is going to be town officials. How do we come up with a process? Again, we want to publicize the process. The eligibility is different. We want to try a timeline out there so people know when these meetings are. It's complicated, right. And we tried to get it. We tried to get it done this year, but we ran up.
Yeah. You got 5 out of 6 is the way you put that. That's good.
Yeah, so we got 5 out of 6, and then went to the hot take.
Let's move to this public outreach, because clearly this committee role could be over the next few months, the next couple of meetings, however many we're going to have, the continued informational to discuss some of these things. So we will plan to have our November meeting. Does anybody have any question about that? Anybody on the committee want to talk about that? We'll have the second Tuesday in November, the week after the election, and we'll meet again and pick up some of these ideas and continue talking about the report. Maybe there'll be some feedback on the comments that you submitted. That sound like a plan to everybody? Anybody want to comment?
See, the other thing too, Todd, I learned this morning that anything the town puts out in regards to this, to the people, as we were talking about a chronicle insert,
At least
that should
one,
also
yeah.
be reviewed by the bond council, because there are prohibitions about the town putting out things that
Okay.
encourage a certain outcome in a vote. Say, we're
Okay.
trying to do this, and here's the benefits, but apparently he even runs it past some state election people to make sure it's a fairly neutral. So I thought the thing that Steve put out was very good, very concise, and didn't sort of say you have to do or else the town's finished or something. I mean, it didn't go over the top.
Right.
But again, whatever we come up with, and we want to also probably put in there some information about voting and absentee ballots, because again, it's going to be somewhat different than what we go through in November. He's got to run through all that, so we can get some things to him, but he's going to sort of have the final say and make sure that we don't get into, explanatory
Right.
text, and then so that's sort of, and again,
It's a
he felt
good point. Yeah. So next meeting, we'll talk about methods of public outreach. Okay, and we'll begin getting information to the public about what the bonding is the referendum look like, and the nature of the question.
Right.
Right.
Maybe Lisa would be willing to help with a redraft of the puff piece that was designed as or presented to us as the informational piece. I think there is no fact or number in that whole thing. And I don't think we should put forward an informational piece to the public without any facts or specifics. So, Lisa would.
You're referring to Steve's writing as a puff piece?
Yes.
Well, perhaps.
I think if I may pipe up here, it's Lisa. I think there's a great benefit in postponing for just the reason that Joanne is suggesting, that I think we were both very concerned that we were floating a proposal that just didn't have any nuts or bolts or scotch tape or string or duct tape thing in it. And it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to Joanne and me. So
Well,
I think that's
right.
a beneficial aspect to this. But as Gordon says, we can't turn it into a promotional piece.
Exactly. And my feeling is that this information that we're talking about, the nuts and bolts, actually does exist in the full engineering report. And that's hardly something that you get out there to the public in order to do their own due diligence as far as self-educating. I mean, a lot of this is going to be about people taking the bull by the horn, learning, getting to understand what the project is.
Yeah. I
So
think what
a puff piece,
yeah,
the so-called puff piece, can be accompanied by something with a little more nuts and bolts, but you
Right.
can't.
I think what have always been concerned about, and perhaps Joanne too, is need to answer the question, will I smell it? Will I see it? What's it going to look like? I mean, those are the big issues that will
Right.
affect.
Well, there was a photograph of what it could look like.
That was very nice. I was very glad to see that. Yeah.
So maybe we could get some more of that. So next, talk more about that kind of thing. Okay, Steve, would that be all right with you? We'll look a little deep. We need to unmute.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I can provide you the Word document. You can use it as a basis or not. It's your project.
Right. But could you get a little more into the weeds, as it were, and give us more specifics?
I'd love to. You tell me what you want.
Okay, thanks. All right. So I think we've covered everything for this
Can
meeting,
you hear?
unless somebody's got something else on the
I'm
committee.
muted.
Who's on the committee?
Okay.
Before, we'll do public comment in a second. Anybody on the committee got something they want to say? Okay,
I think
let's
the thing
move on
to
to
do
the
is if we
public.
can get, maybe set it as a goal to getting presentable to Joe Fozzie, you know, by the end of the year, that's good.
Okay.
You know, so again, he's going to have a lot to say. I mean, we may think this should be included, this not, but if he feels it's not the way these things work, then that's that. And I think so we have put on the front page of the town website again Steve's updated report, so that is there for people that want to see all the nuts and figures. So it does
It's both
it hangs on that.
engineering and environmental. Yeah.
What? Yeah, there's information.
Both engineering and environmental.
Nuts and bolts, it's there. I mean, I think most,
Yeah.
at this point, most people can look at that and say, yeah, this makes sense or this doesn't, you know, and that's, anyway.
Okay, so I think that wraps up the agenda portion. Let's open up to the public comment. I know there's a bunch of the public here. Vern, are you still around or no? Okay, she's gone. Anybody else from the public want to talk? Yeah, Joe?
Yes, can you hear me?
Joe Pryor. Yeah,
I was wondering,
yep, I can hear you.
do we want the referendum to create a mechanism to collect these fees? How are the fees going to be legally collected? Is it a real estate overlay? Is it an authority that's created? And however that is structured, do we need to mention that as being a new type of fee mechanism that the town doesn't point?
Joe, I'll talk to Dizzy about that, but he said what normally happens with these programs is the Board of Selectmen would hire a construction manager. They would oversee construction of the project, and then eventually the town would evolve that responsibility into a water pollution control authority. But I don't think that's normally done in the vote to construct. That's a subsequent whole set of arrangements.
That answer, Joe, is that enough?
I was just thinking this might be the time during a referendum to create that authority. Maybe we should just look.
I'll talk to him about that, but I think he said he sort of separated out the construction with the administration.
Okay.
It's a really important issue, you know, because I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think people need to know, you know, it's before they can have an intelligent vote. And Steve, you talked about the taxing district often set up to fund these things, right? Isn't that right, Steve? You have to unmute, Steve. You have to unmute yourself.
I'm getting there. Sorry, I'm not quick with a computer. That's not unusual. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
So, and when, in your experience, when do most of them create the taxing authorities?
It's usually right around the time period of when the project gets approved. I would say it doesn't have to be at the. It does not have to be at the same time.
How it's going to be funded?
Pardon me, Joanne?
How can people make a reasonable and informed decision whether they want it or not until they know how it's going to be funded?
That's sort of a different question. Really, I mean, forming a tax district and everything else is then saying to the public that the town intends to pay for some portion of it through general taxation and some portion of it through connection fees and fees.
So are you saying that typically towns have a referendum on that issue first?
No, they typically have a referendum to the project or not even to proceed ahead with.
I didn't hear you.
They typically proceed. They typically take a vote on whether they have a project to proceed with or not first, and then figuring out.
I love every project if I didn't have to pay for it.
Well, I bet you everybody would.
I don't think anybody has said that taxpayers are not going to have to pay part of this project. But again, that's some of the details to be worked out and wants to proceed with a project. So anyway, I will bring, back to Joe's point, I will bring that up as a question for the council as far as process.
But I would also say it's a question for our Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance, I would urge you to consider asking the Board of Selectmen maybe to have a separate referendum. Maybe we should just have a referendum that says, okay, all people, are you willing to absorb some percentage of the cost of this project? And maybe now we're talking about the first, second, third choice voting. Maybe people get to have first, second, and third choices. I'm willing to pay for half. I'm willing to pay for a third. I'm willing for a quarter. Maybe we should have that kind of vote across the town.
Okay, we
I
can
think
discuss.
that's why I think you're off on a tangent, because I think the bond count, if the town is going to float a bond, you have to go with the way the people that do this say they form the question once they look at Steve's Steve's report and the USDA documents in the town plan. And it's not I mean, we don't get to decide whether we do this multiple choice or yes or no. But most things, as Steve said right along, is these bonding questions are yes, not a multiple choice. They're not a ranked voting like they vote for president in Maine or something. But anyway, we're taking it one step at a time, and this is the next logical step.
Let's open it up again. Anybody else from the public want to? Yeah, Bruce, go for it.
You know, just the discussion. The one thing I see that I think we really need to do a better job of is determining the costs. People say, oh, they took up some of the costs, but you know, what is the proposal? How much would the town pick up? You know, I just ran the numbers. So Gordon mentioned $4.7 million bond issue. I just assumed a 3% interest cost, which I think is probably in the ballpark. You put $110,000 maintenance, that's $250,000. Someone mentioned 35 people would use it. So that's $6,000 per person per year. But assume the town picks up half of that, which has to be worked out before you go to the people. That's $275 a month per participant. I have no idea what it is. Saying that, you know, right now, all of this is shoulda, woulda, coulda from a financial standpoint. I think someone needs to really kind of hone in so the town, before they vote, can say, oh, this is the magnitude of this project. You know, this is what the cost would be.
Now, Bruce, if I could start to answer that, I think that's one of the advantages of being able to postpone into the spring. I think we're going to be able to define what we're talking about along those lines. And I think there's will, and I'm very glad to see it, on the finance and the select people for supporting the annual cost, the $110,000, and perhaps even the hookup, the $3,500 that each household will have to pay to get. But you know that all those details have to get worked out, and we just, as Steve pointed out, until we know where the property is and
Right.
how we're going to do it, we won't have a contractor's estimate. And without that, we're sort of out to dry at the moment. So,
Well, as I said, it just, as I listen, it's something that's lacking, any sort of clear indication of how much the town would have to pay, how much users would have to pay. So, which is important for people before they vote for something.
Sure. I mean, there's multiple of boards involved in this whole thing, and certainly the Board of Finance is where all of those kinds of numbers be addressed. It's way beyond the expertise of this committee to even discuss them. So thankfully, there are people who know about these things who will be looking into this stuff.
Well, I don't think it's beyond the scope of this committee to raise questions. It may be beyond the scope of raising the questions. You can always hire an expert to find an answer for you. It's raising the right questions and concerns of the people. And we shouldn't forget that on blowback we got from people last time involved people who say, oh my goodness, I had to put in a new septic system and it cost me $1,000. I had to refinance my home. I had to do other things. That they are not going to be overly receptive, concerned about somebody having to pay $3,500 hookup fee. But we should just.
Okay, anybody from the public got another comment? Mark? Mark?
Hi.
Hey.
I would agree with the previous commentator that you folks have been studying this problem for 5 years, and there seems to be an extraordinary decision about the finances and the all of the money aspects of this. You don't seem to know how many users are going to use this and how the financing is going to be split up between the town, the taxpayers, and the users. And I would furthermore agree with Joanne that you have evidently located a site for this on the Pink House property, but there's no indication of how the is going to be acquired. Is it going to be rented, leased, or acquired by eminent domain? There's, if you're going to build this thing, you got to have a place to put it. And it's clear to me that you don't seem to have any idea of how this is going to happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. Anybody else have a comment? Okay, I think that wraps up the public comment portion of the meeting. Anybody want to move to adjourn this meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Thanks, Don. And second?
Second.
Lisa seconds. Okay, so noted. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for attending, and stay tuned for next month's second Tuesday, 5 p.m.
Thank you all.
Have a great month. Stay well. Stay safe. Good to see you all.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Todd.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Todd.
Everybody stay well.
Thank you, Gordon.
All right, take care,
Up on the
folks.
website.
There we go.
Jonathan's still here. John, can you end this meeting? Can I end it? I can end it. Okay.
There you go.
Bye-bye.